I wrote the first chapter of my debut novel, The Christmas Gift. And it's wrong. I spent weeks on it, rewrote it perhaps 4 or 5 times, and finally got it to a standard that I was genuinely proud of. Then I realised it just had to go. Let me explain why. So here's my original notes for chapter 1, and interestingly the chapter itself kind of varied a little bit from this, but ultimately the structure was exactly the same. I've got the notes both here on my desk and also up on the screen, because these ones here might be a little bit difficult to see because the shadow of the desk is kind of blocking the notepad a little bit. And I must remember when editing this that I need to blur out this section here, because that's a very big spoiler indeed. So effectively what I planned for this first chapter was to introduce one of the main characters here, at least at the beginning, Mr. Pennington. And the scene-by-scene structure for this chapter goes as follows. The scene starts by the man walking through the door. And as it turns out, when I actually wrote the chapter, I didn't do that, so I've already deviated quite badly. He takes a seat and Pennington berates him for a mistake before letting him go. And over in the UK, I don't know if it's the same for America or anywhere else in the world, but letting him go basically means he got fired. And for reference, so the rest of these notes make sense, Mr. Pennington owns a investment bank called Pennington Investment Partners, PIP. At least that's what it's called at the moment. At the end of the day, he leaves the building after a meeting about investing in a new organisation that has found a way to avoid large tax payments that will return up to 500% return on investment within 2 years. All sounds pretty dull, but there is a reason I decided to do it this way. Hopefully, even from just this short segment of a scene, you have kind of some image in your mind about what sort of a man this is, and that's exactly the reason why I decided to keep it in. Here we've got a man who's berating his employee for making a mistake and immediately sacking him. And the fact that he owns Pennington Investment Partners is revealed in this section of the story, so even that simple point might elicit a kind of a stereotypical idea of what a boss of that kind of company would be like. And another detail that I added here that I thought would be a little bit more subtle is that he's clearly very interested in putting his money into a large organisation for a potential 500% return that's found a large way of avoiding tax payments. And so in my mind, just adding a little detail like that will go a long way to implanting an idea into the imagination of the reader of exactly what kind of character this may be. We then go on to the next scene, which is Pennington going to a spa for his daily pamper. And again, immediately, that little, even just one line in the book I added, because again, that kind of reinforces that idea on what kind of an individual this may be, and strikes up a conversation about Christmas. By this point, the reader knows that it's Christmas Eve, somewhere in the book. Then the masseuse asks if he's found the present that he's been looking for, to which he answers to the negative. A little bit vague here about what that present is, deliberately, because it just kind of adds a little bit of interest. Although, to be honest, if you've seen the book in the bookshelf and there's likely going to be a picture of a dog on the front, most people will know exactly what the present is by this point. But just for the style of it, I think it makes just a little bit of curiosity, however small it may be. And again, another little bit here just to reinforce that idea in the reader's mind of Mr. Pennington. The masseuse mentions that he knows a guy selling them cheap for Xmas, and then after asking if they are genuine, with no impurities, again adding more to that character, he agrees to purchase one. So narratively, not much has really happened. All we've got a guy who works for this big company that he owns, he's sacked someone and then he's gone for a pamper at a spa. But again, in my mind, the idea of these two scenes wasn't to kind of immerse you into the story and into action or whatever else first, but to introduce you as a reader, subtly but very strongly I feel, to one of the main characters in the story, Mr. Pennington. And as I say, by now hopefully you have a good idea of what sort of a guy this is, not by me telling you, but by inferring it based on his actions and his mannerisms. It's the old show don't tell trope, and the point being is that hopefully, after just these first 2 scenes even of notes, the feel and perhaps even the image of Mr. Pennington is now deeply inside your imagination, more organically through his actions and his mannerisms than just being told what he's like. And that creates a much closer attachment between the reader and the character. At least, this is what I think as I'm planning it. So we now skip ahead slightly in time to where Pennington has now bought the present and he's returned with it in a box to keep at his sister's. Because of course, he doesn't want to ruin the surprise for his kids. And then again, we have just a little extra illustrative scene here talking about his house and the lavish way in which it's decorated for Christmas. Adding to that, I haven't got it in the notes here, but I did add this in, that he's going to be hosting a big Christmas party with all of the high-class kind of people that he knows, other business owners, other investors, etc. Again, this scene does very little narratively, but again, as a reader, really strengthens that character of Pennington into your imagination. And hopefully by this point, the emotional investment the readers put onto this character, whether positively or negatively, is quite strong. And once the kids wake up, they start opening their presents. Of course, it's Christmas. A box tied up with a bow, that should be, I didn't write that down, I just kind of knew that, is brought in and is opened to reveal a perfectly trimmed poodle dressed up in a pink dress with a bow in the fur. And in fact now, again, even though the main character has just been introduced, who of course is Fayley the poodle, this final section of the scene, and indeed the whole chapter, actually goes a lot further to, again, further enhance that image of Pennington in your mind rather than Fayley himself. So then I went ahead over the next several days or couple of weeks and wrote that chapter in full, perfected it, got it as well as I possibly can for my own standard. I'm a perfectionist, so each sentence is like a whole project to me. And finally ended up with a version that I was very proud of. And here it is, Chapter 1, A Very Trying Christmas Eve. Now, as I mentioned, I did diverge somewhat considerably from the original plan. The whole spa scene, for example, was replaced because really the problem came, as you can probably have guessed, between scene 2 and 3, where there's that gap of space of time, and it was just kind of too much of a leap between scenes to make that make sense. So I ended up replacing this scene 2, which was the spa scene, with the scene of Mr. Pennington going to collect Faylie. And all in all, that was 2,583 words. Now, initially, that doesn't sound like a lot. But again, this is probably like the 4th or 5th rewrite of this chapter, which I did over and over again to try and really solidify that image in the reader's mind. Again, that was the whole main purpose of Chapter 1, was to introduce Pennington in a very kind of emotionally active way for the reader. And there were many times in which that just didn't come across while I was writing the chapter, so I had to go back, redo scenes, take scenes out. Again, the whole reason I had to replace scene 2 is because, I say, this one just didn't work. So again, after probably a few days or a week or so of writing and readjusting, I finally came up with this version, which I was very happy with. It ticked all the boxes I wanted it to. It gave the reader a very good idea of Mr. Pennington. I sent it out to my friends and family to read. They all came back with the exact idea of Mr. Pennington that I wanted them to. And in fact, I'd say that the new scene 2, rather than the spa scene, actually went a longer way to do that, because I was able to use his investment process to highlight not only the way he thinks, but also his temper when things go wrong. So there we go. We now have a full Stage 1 polished version of Chapter 1. So of course then I went ahead and started planning for Chapter 2, and Chapter 3, and Chapter 4, and so on. And I would say about halfway through, or even 3/4 of the way through writing the plan for Chapter 2 was the moment I realised that all of this work that we've done up to this point, however many minutes I've been talking about it in this video, didn't work and had to be thrown away. It was annoying, it was frustrating, but it was necessary. In fact, I didn't throw it away exactly. I stored it into an archive folder because I just thought, as I keep writing the book, it's always nice to have kind of the history of it and to see how things changed. And for this purpose, documenting the process as it goes. And so now I've always kind of got it to refer back to and just to see how things develop over time, which I think is quite nice. And add to that, of course, it's also the proof that the work was done and a lot of effort and a lot of hours and a lot of contemplation were put into the story. This is the reality of things. You never write the right thing first of all, unless, it's a rare occasion. You're not supposed to be able to do that. You go through the process, throw things away, scrap things, reimagine things many times over, then you finish that chapter, go on to the next few, finish the book, then go back to the beginning, change everything all over again. So I'm expecting a lot more of that frustration to take place. But this is the reality of writing, and it's part of the reason I enjoy it. Being able to see it come from kind of an embryonic form into the full, fleshed out, final version, and keeping a log of those changes, I think is going to be invaluable for myself and anybody that finds interest in these videos. So, what was wrong with this chapter? Why doesn't it work? It probably does, but as I looked at it more and more, I thought that really the main issue is it's starting in the wrong place. All of my writing projects are animal point of view books. They're designed to really get a reader acquainted with the lives of animals so that they can kind of build that empathetic idea into the struggles and the tribulations that they go through to hopefully bring about a wider societal appreciation for their lives. This is also my planned debut novel, and in this chapter, what have we got? We've got a mean-tempered executive in the investment industry who's buying a Christmas present. And the more I thought about that, I just thought, there's better ways to start your debut novel as a point of view animal writer. It needs to start with, well, the point of view of the animal. Let me read to you the first paragraph from both this version of Chapter 1 and the new version of Chapter 1 that I've written since, and you tell me which you would think is the best place to start. Chapter 1. A Very Trying Christmas Eve. The crack of Mr. Pennington's palm against the smooth oak surface of his enormous, neatly arranged desk sent shivers not only down Gareth's back, but, one would imagine, through all the damn floors in the building. He was very well acquainted with confrontation, had faced far too many already in his long career, and so managed to keep his flinch out of sight, staring the man dead in the eyes, his face certainly displaying a lot more stoicism than his racing heart. So that's the first paragraph of the original Chapter 1. So now let's compare that to the first paragraph in the updated Chapter 1, and you tell me which you think is the best way to start this book. Chapter 1. An exciting Christmas evening. There had been weird noises all around him as he had sat there, frightened out of his life in the dark. There had been a long period of shrieks, shrill howls, stomping noises all around him, things he had never heard before. Now, arguably, one could say that both are perfectly fine. It's just starting from a different perspective. And in my mind now, I think it certainly was the right decision to move away from describing exclusively Mr. Pennington from kind of an omnipotent kind of third-person perspective. Perhaps, maybe I'm just overthinking things, but as someone who knows where the story's going to go, I'm more looking back at this kind of retrospectively as if someone's already read the book and now is rereading it. I'm looking at this now, knowing the rest of the story, thinking this is going to make a lot more of a strong opening. Not to mention that, of course, as my motivation is to give people the view through the animal's eyes, that is exactly what we're doing. We're starting off as readers not knowing what's going on in the story, as is Faley not knowing what the hell's going on, why he's in this situation, etc. So we're learning along with Faley, which is more of an indirect first-person account through his eyes, even though it's a third-person narrative. And so I think that's where the additional strength for this version of Chapter 1 comes into play over the original Chapter 1. So this is now what I'm working with, and as you can probably tell, it's going to mean a whole lot of restructuring for following chapters as well, which were planned with the first Chapter 1 in mind. Writing isn't just coming up with a story and then writing it down. This is what it actually looks like. See you in part 4.